All right, we're going to be looking at lesson 1.2, which is all about line segments and midpoints. So let's go ahead and jump right in. When we talk about midpoints, we're talking about literally the point that falls in the middle of a line segment. So if we had line segment AB, as you see here in this very complicated looking picture, the midpoint is just going to be the point that's actually in the middle of that line segment. The definition here says that the midpoint of a line segment is the point that divides the segment into two congruent segments. Remember that congruent simply means that they are of equal length. Okay, they're the same length. So we've talked in the past about a formula for this. So we've got a formula that says if we add up the x's and divide by 2, add up the y's and divide by 2, that will get me to the midpoint of a line segment. So let's let somebody with a saucy accent show us how to do this.
G'day, welcome to the Tech Math channel. What we're going to be having a look at in this video is the midpoint formula. Just another thing when you're looking at linear equations that might come up. Really simple to use. Okay, so I'll launch straight into it. So say you had 2 points on a linear equation or 2 points on a Cartesian plane. The first one we're going to put out is -3, -2. And we're going to have another point at 4, 5. Okay, so we'll plot those first. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to try and find the middle point between these. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean by this. So -3, -3, -2 is just here. 4, 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And up 5 is going to be just here. So if I was to draw a line in between these, okay, so I'll draw a line in between these. And what the middle point formula finds is if we were to try and find the middle point between these 2 points, where exactly would it be? Okay, so this is a really simple thing how to do. And the way I think about this, without thinking about a formula so much, is I think what we're after is we're after an x, y value. So the first thing we're going to be after is the x value. So the middle between these two x values, between -3 and 4. So -3 and 4. If we want to find out the point between these, what we do is we add them together and we divide by 2. So -3 plus 4 is 1, divided by 2 is half. And that's going to be our x value, is at half here. The y value, we've got one point here, which is at -2, and another one which is at 5. So -2 and 5, and we're going to work out the average between these ones as well. Okay, so -2 plus 5 is 3. This is 3 over 2, which is equal to 1.5. So our xy values, and I'll write them down here, is half, 1.5. Okay, what the midpoint formula is basically saying is you get the 2 x values and you add them together, divide by 2, then you get the 2 y values, add them together, divide by 2, and you got your xy midpoint value. Okay, so that's really all there is to it. But I'll tell you what, I'll go through another example. So, okay, let's just go through one more example. I'll draw a line going down this way. We'll have a midpoint between the points of -3, call that 3. And we'll work out where that adds out in a second. And we'll call this one down here 2 minus 4. Okay? So let's plot these first. Okay, so we have -3 and 3, which is just here. And we have 2, and we're going to go down 4. So to join these up, boom, 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 we're going to work out the midway point between these. Okay, so once again, this is going to be an xy value. So let's do this. The x, first let's have a look at those. We have -3 and we have 2, so I'm going to add those two together, divide by 2. And for the y, I've got 3 and -4, so I'm going to add those two together, or 3 plus -4, which is the same as 3 minus 4 over 2. And then they're going to give us our xy value. So -3 plus 2 is -1 over 2, and that's our x value, so -0.5. And 3 minus 4 is -1 over 2. is minus a half. So our point's going to be minus half. That's our xy value there. Okay? And that's how you work out midpoints. It's really simple, right? The midpoint formula, really basic. It's basically working out an average between the x's and then for the y's. That's all it is. Anyway, hopefully that video was informative for you. See you next time. Bye.
Okay, so now that he has kind of walked us through a couple of examples, let's get one for our notes in case you haven't taken one yet. So when we are finding the coordinates of a midpoint, we find the coordinates by, or the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write down our midpoint formula. So let's say we're given the points -2, -1, and then 4, 2. We're going to take our midpoint formula, which is average the x's, average the y's, or x plus x over 2, y plus y over 2, and we're just going to substitute, okay? So what that means is this is going to be x1, y1, x2, y2, or I could do vice versa, x1, y1, x2, y2. Either way will work, okay? So if this is x1, this would be -2 plus 4 divided by 2, and this would be -1 plus 2 divided by 2, and then we're just going to add and divide. So this is going to end up being 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and then this one's going to end up being 1 divided by 2, which is just simply a half. And then we could check that by coming over here and counting right 1, up a half, and it does appear that we are in the middle of that line segment. Midpoint really is easy, guys, so here's a good solid example. All right, the next thing we want to look at is finding an endpoint. So this guy gives a good visual. Let's watch him find an endpoint.
Okay, so we now know if I give you 2 points, how do you find the point right between them, the midpoint? That's just by averaging the x's, then averaging the y's, and you actually get that point right there. Now, the question is, what if I give you sort of the opposite question? That is, we've got a midpoint. Suppose I give you that midpoint, and I give you one of the endpoints. How could you now use that information to actually find this first endpoint? So the question is, instead of me giving you 2 endpoints and finding the midpoint, what if I just give you a midpoint and one endpoint? How do you find the other endpoint? Well, actually, let me try to solidify this with a particular example. Suppose that we know that the midpoint is equal to -9, 8, and one endpoint. So one endpoint is equal to -16, 9. The question is, what's the other endpoint? So where is the other endpoint? Okay, well, we can work through this sort of algebraically and just find it, but it's also good to think about a picture to get a sense, at least vaguely, where that answer should lie, because if we get something completely different, we know we're wrong. For example, you can just imagine I could have done this lecture, for example, 1,000 times, and each time I get the wrong answer, the picture would have told me something was wrong. Not that that happened. So I try to graph it here in advance, and you can see I graphed -9, 8 over here. This is right there. -16, 9 is over here. So in fact, this is one of the endpoints, you see. This is supposed to be the midpoint. So where should that other point lie? Well, you can sort of imagine connecting this line, these 2 points together, and if we connect them with a line, and then what we do is just continue that line past the midpoint, sort of the same distance, it would give us a rough sense, like maybe right around there. I don't know, that's about it. Someplace around here is going to be the other point. That's what we're trying to locate. So I could call that point, let me call that point x1, y1. And then we'll see what our answer is and see if it makes sense that it's located around there. Okay, well, so how do I proceed? Well, if I have this picture, what do I know for sure? What I know for sure is the formula for a midpoint. It's just the average of these 2 values. So this midpoint which we know equals -9, 8, we also know can be found by finding the averages of the x values and the averages of the y values. Well, the averages of the x value would be what? It would be x1 minus 16 divided by 2. I just added up the two x values, x1 and minus 16 divided by 2. And the y values, y1, and then we have a plus 9 divided by 2. Okay, well now I can find x1 because I know this thing, x1 minus 16 over 2 equals minus 9. So if I set those two things equal to each other, I can solve for x1. Similarly, I know that y1 plus 9 all over 2 equals 8, so I can solve this thing, in fact, for y1. So let's do that. So if I solve the first thing, what do I see? I see that x1 minus 16 over 2, that has to equal minus 9. If I multiply through by the 2, I see that x1 minus 16 equals negative 18. If I now add 16 to both sides, I see that x1 must be equal to, let's see, what would it be? Looks like negative 2. So that's negative 2. What's the y1? Well, I know that y1 plus 9 all divided by 2, that has to equal 8. So if I cross multiply or multiply everything through by 2, I'd see that y1 plus 9 has to equal 16. If I now subtract the 9 over, I see that y1 has to equal, I guess it would be 7. So where should the other endpoint be? We know exactly where it should be. It should be at negative 2, comma 7. Is that answer reasonable? Let's take a look at our picture and see if that's a sensible answer. By the way, if our answer were something like 25, comma 36, we know that can't be right because where would 25 or 36 be? It would be, way over here, and I have to go way up. It'd be like it'd be right by my nose right now. You see? It'd be way up to here, somewhere by my nose. But that can't be right. It's got to be over here. Let's see how close we were. So we think it should be negative 2. And look, well, not exactly right. Negative 2 is here. And it should be around 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's actually pretty close. It seems that this picture shows that this answer is reasonable. So we can figure the math is actually correct. If you work through it, it's right. The answer is the other endpoint would be at minus 2, 7. There you go. So you can always find the other endpoint if you just know one endpoint in the midpoint.
Okay, so really solid explanation there. I hope it made sense to you. Let's get some formalizing in your notes. So here's a similar problem to what he just worked. M is the midpoint of AB. A has coordinates 2, 2, and M has coordinates 4, negative 3. Find the coordinates of B. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to let the coordinates of B, the one I don't know, be equal to xy. Okay? And then we're going to use our midpoint formula in order to solve that. Okay, so let me just show you what happened here. X and y, that's what I'm looking for the coordinates of B. I set the formula itself equal to the given midpoint, which is 4, negative 3. And then I plug 2 in for x and 2 in for y for the other part of the formula. So remember, this was x plus x over 2. And this was y plus y over 2. Once I get this formula set up, then I'm going to find the x coordinate. So I'm going to take this x, set it equal to this x, and it's going to look like this. So 4 is going to be equal to 2 plus x over 2. Then I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So this 4 is going to turn into an 8, you can see here. And this 2 is going to divide this away. And from here, right, I'm going to get 2 plus x is equal to 8. And then I can just solve it. So subtract 2, and I get x is equal to 6. Now I'm going to do that same exact thing over here for the y coordinate. So here's my y coordinate, negative 3. And I'm going to set it equal to my y, which is 2 plus y over 2. Looks like this. And then I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 again. Right, so this is going to turn into negative 6. This is going to divide away and leave me with 2 plus y. And then I'm just going to subtract 2 from both sides. And I'm going to get that my y is negative 8. Meaning that the coordinates of B, which are my other endpoint, is 6, negative 8. And we can check that by graphing and making sure it makes sense. So here is 2, 2, which was one endpoint. Here's my midpoint, 4, negative 3. Here is my endpoint that I've found, 6, negative 8. And it does appear that these are, or that truly is in the middle. Okay. All right, so here's a quizzes for you to practice. You're going to find the link in It's Learning. Once you get through practicing, you'll be able to take the quiz on it. Good luck.